In this podcast episode, Bret Weinstein discusses a wide range of issues, from his academic background and turbulent experience at Evergreen State College to his insights on current political upheavals, conspiracy theories surrounding Jeffrey Epstein, the nature of power and surveillance, the looming Iran war, the injection of theology into contemporary conflicts, and finally, the crisis of human relations and sexuality in modern society. Throughout the conversation, Weinstein highlights the complex interplay between biology, politics, culture, and history, and how these factors inform the unraveling world around us. Bret Weinstein begins by outlining his career as an evolutionary biologist, describing his shift from an initial interest in neurobiology and cellular biology to evolutionary biology, discovered during graduate studies at the University of Michigan. He recounts his fieldwork studying tent-making bats in Panama and explains the core theme of his dissertation, biological trade-offs. Instead of viewing evolution merely as progressive improvement, Weinstein stresses how natural selection also enforces limits due to inherent biological constraints, using the example of cellular reproduction and aging. He describes how our cells' limited capacity to divide serves as a cancer suppression mechanism, illuminating why aging occurs as a trade-off between bodily repair and cancer prevention. He also worked on questions such as why species richness increases near the equator and the evolution of human morality, illustrating how evolutionary thinking can apply beyond biology into politics and history. Weinstein shares his experience at Evergreen State College, where he and his wife Heather were tenured professors. The college was founded on radical experimental principles with no traditional departments, grades, or hierarchical power structures, which initially provided extraordinary academic freedom. However, in 2017, a new president arrived with intentions to restructure the institution in more conventional ways, stoking racial tensions and implementing divisive changes under the guise of addressing a supposed white supremacy problem that Weinstein argues did not exist on campus. When Weinstein opposed these changes, he became the target of a student-led protest that escalated into intimidation, threats, and a campus takeover, with police sidelined and student mobs controlling the environment. Despite support from many students, including students of color, the hostility culminated in Weinstein and his wife being forced to leave after legal disputes. He highlights this episode as a microcosm of witch hunt dynamics fueled by crowd psychology, polarization, and institutional failure. Weinstein discusses the revelations contained in the Epstein files, pointing out a pattern that suggests the presence of a vast conspiratorial thread connecting figures of great power, which mainstream narratives either ignore or suppress. He expresses concern that there is effectively no functioning FBI investigating these matters, calling the Bureau an obstructionist entity that actively hinders inquiries rather than facilitates them. He also references whistleblowers exposing national surveillance and questions how agencies like the NSA and Mossad could miss the extensive criminal activities around Epstein. He theorizes that some factions within the intelligence and power structures deliberately allow such things to flourish to wield influence and control. Weinstein introduces the concept of a time-traveling money printer, an analogy for those with privileged insider information leveraging knowledge of unfolding events, like pandemics or market crashes, to enrich themselves while the public remains unaware. The Epstein saga, he argues, reveals an uncomfortably close relationship between power, secrecy, wealth, and exploitation, with much information filtered or withheld to prevent full public understanding or outrage. Reflecting on his own struggles with censorship around COVID-19 and controversial subjects, Weinstein highlights the ongoing efforts by powerful interests to control public speech and information. He underscores that while free speech is vital and has been partially preserved, there are relentless moves to find justifications, real or fabricated, to suppress dissent, including attacks on constitutional rights like the Second Amendment. He criticizes the collapse of legitimate investigative journalism, the complicity of universities in enforcing ideological conformity, and the failure of institutions meant to pursue truth. The narrative control serves to fragment and polarize public opinion, maintain the status quo, and prevent collective action against abuses of power. Weinstein examines the recent war involving Iran, observing that theological and eschatological beliefs, particularly among certain evangelical Christian groups, have gained unusual prominence in shaping political motivations. Leaders and factions who seemingly believe in religious prophecies are driving policies with potentially apocalyptic consequences. He contrasts this with the secular origins of Western democratic values, rooted in an enlightened restraint on theological governance, emphasizing tolerance and pluralism. This fusion of millennia-old religious narratives and contemporary geopolitics threatens rational governance, elevating the risk of catastrophic conflict. Weinstein stresses the urgent need to understand how such ancient belief systems influence modern powerful actors, noting that some motivations may be explicit while others are manipulative uses of faith to shape populations' behavior. In discussing Israel and its internal politics, Weinstein clarifies that most Jewish people in Israel do not support Prime Minister Netanyahu, and that his recent rise in popularity largely results from a wartime rally effect. He connects current conflicts to a broader evolutionary model he calls lineage selection, which explains human history as an ongoing series of competition and displacement based on genetic relatedness. He contrasts this with the more cooperative reciprocal societies found in Western democracies. He worries that Israel increasingly embodies Old Testament tribal instincts, reverting to lineage-based violence that could drag the wider world into ethnic and religious conflict, undermining multicultural and pluralistic modern values. This genealogy-based rivalry, he emphasizes, drives much of the territorial and political disputes in the Middle East, underscoring the dangers of nuclear-armed states engaged in escalating belligerency. Shifting to economics, Weinstein expresses concerns about systemic fragility hidden beneath exuberant stock market valuations, fueled partly by a large bubble around AI companies and tech stocks. He warns of widespread fraud reminiscent of Enron-level malfeasance, potentially imperiling the financial system. He references The Great Taking, a book detailing ways average people's assets, such as homes and bank deposits, could be confiscated or transformed, especially via mechanisms like central bank digital currencies that could enable unprecedented control over citizens' money. This convergence of technological overreach and economic instability, Weinstein warns, poses a grave threat to personal freedom and societal stability. Weinstein acknowledges the concept of the fourth turning, a cyclical crisis period characterized by upheaval and possible regeneration or collapse, noting that current global tensions, especially involving Iran, Israel, and the United States, fit this paradigm. He cautions that regional quagmires might easily escalate into nuclear exchanges, particularly with Israel's possession of nuclear weapons and the volatile dynamics of its leadership. The moral responsibilities accompanying such destructive power, he insists, require leaders to act with extreme caution, and the current trajectory of belligerence is profoundly dangerous. Addressing personal risk, Weinstein admits concern for his safety due to openly criticizing powerful regimes and discussing sensitive topics like Epstein and the Middle East. He explains that while outright assassination is a last resort for those in power, more common tactics include attempts to ruin reputations and suppress voices through social and professional means. Comparing himself and other outspoken figures like Tucker Carlson, he emphasizes that despite slander and marginalization, they continue speaking out, though often paying a significant price in freedom and social standing. This repression, he stresses, serves to intimidate and discourage others from challenging entrenched power. Weinstein offers a nuanced view on religion from an evolutionary standpoint. As a committed secular materialist, he acknowledges the absence of direct supernatural evidence, but affirms the adaptive nature of religious belief systems. He criticizes the dismissive attitude held by some in evolutionary biology who label religion a mind virus, arguing instead that religion has significant evolutionary value by constraining behavior and fostering social cohesion. He distinguishes between different religious interpretations, such as Judaic lineage-based violence versus Christian inclusivity, and considers religion's impact on morality, culture, and political dynamics as a fundamental evolutionary puzzle that deserves serious study. The conversation turns toward the modern crisis in human relationships, especially romantic and sexual dynamics, which Weinstein attributes to toxic cultural myths and disruptive technologies. Rejecting the traditional mythology of marriage as a grim compromise with biology, he proposes that excellent, fulfilling marriages are genuinely possible through developmental growth and mutual transformation. He laments how contemporary society, influenced by pornography, the Me Too movement, and sexual revolution narratives, has poisoned young people's understanding of sex and relationships, fostering widespread the ick in both men and women. This results in parasites or predatory behaviors on both sides and a breakdown of long-term partnerships necessary for stable civilization. Weinstein stresses that this crisis is self-inflicted and correctable once society recognizes how it has strayed. Weinstein discusses biological mechanisms underlying human attraction, referencing studies about pheromones and immune system compatibility. He worries that modern dating apps, filtered social interactions, and over-sexualized media distort crucial biological cues, leading individuals to make poorer mate choices. He speculates, somewhat humorously, whether ceasing deodorant use might improve mate selection and reduce divorce rates, underscoring how chemical and evolutionary signals are often ignored or overridden today. This disconnect exacerbates relationship problems and fuels social dissatisfaction. Despite outlining numerous serious problems spanning power, society, biology, and culture, Weinstein ends with cautious optimism. He believes the damage humans have inflicted on themselves, through poisoned bodies, minds, and institutions, can be reversed if acknowledged and addressed. The key first step, he says, is waking people up to the harmful myths and misdirections currently shaping their lives and choices. He emphasizes that problems are fixable when understood, and that widespread cultural healing and reconstruction remain possible, encouraging listeners to take this message seriously. Finally, Weinstein shares ways for listeners to follow his work. Through the Dark Horse podcast, co-hosted with his wife Heather, available on various platforms, and his social media handle @Bret Weinstein, with one T to distinguish from others. They have also authored a book, A Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century, which addresses many of the issues discussed, available in print and as a narrated audiobook. These platforms serve as venues for ongoing dialogue about biology, politics, culture, and personal development.